So just how powerful is Piper McLean actually? Most of the time when we think of Piper, we don't associate her with being powerful because she usually isn't very physically combative. And even though she does get better with swordplay as the series goes on, she still almost always prefers diplomacy and negotiation rather than a straight fight. But that doesn't mean she's not incredibly dangerous in her own right, and that's what we wanted to dive into today. A lot of what we're going to be talking about is her charm speak, especially because we don't technically know the upper limits of what it's capable of doing, but we do know that it can be learned, and more importantly, it can be practiced and improved. Over the series, we see that Piper has gotten better at using it, but there is evidence in the series that charm speak isn't a hereditary talent that you can only get by being a child of Aphrodite. This is where Piper got it, but when she arrived in New Rome, Reyna was able to recognize charm speak because of her time with Circe, who we know brought on new students and taught them the ways of sorcery. Similarly, we know that Hecate once had a school of magic over 100 years ago, and Charmspeak was part of what she taught to her students. But since we know that she recruited all matter of demigods, nymphs, and even mortals, we know that Charmspeak is a skill that can be honed. What makes Piper so talented with it, however, is because she's able to read people better than anyone else. And we actually got into this when we talked about why Hazel is such a perfect mistbender. So we're going to touch on it briefly here, but consider this video a spiritual successor to that one. Charmspeak is most effective when the user is trying to convince their target of something that the target already wants. Piper can't just make someone start to believe something that isn't already within their natural character, and she has to take advantage of a person's innermost desires in order to capitalize on what they already want to do, effectively just giving them a little nudge. And this is confirmed by Piper herself in the House of Hades. When Hazel described what mistbending is like, she says something very similar. She says that she can only cause people to see what they already want to see, and she can't force the world to see it her way. Hazel has to learn how to read people as well in order to create an image tailored to them, and when she's done, Piper directly calls out the similarities to Charmspeak. This means that the key component to using Charmspeak is to know your audience, and if Piper knows who she's talking to, she can do almost anything as long as they're not aware that she's using the power. Once someone becomes aware that they're being charm-spoken, the effect is diminished and easier to resist, but Piper has done some pretty crazy things with her Charmspeak before. So let's talk about some of those, and let's actually talk about a different franchise where Piper doesn't even appear, but might offer us some more insight. First, she was able to wake Jason from being unconscious by yelling at him to wake up when he was in freefall. Jason was completely passed out, falling into the ocean, and Piper was able to get him to snap back to consciousness, indicating that her target doesn't have to be awake in order for it to work. We don't technically know what the upper limits or application of something like this could be, but if Piper is imaginative enough, she could theoretically take advantage of sleeping enemies. We also know that Piper's Charmspeak can work on non-organic individuals like Festus. In the House of Hades, Piper is cornered by Chione, and since Chione knows about the Charmspeak and is a creature of chaos, she has increased resistance to being charm-spoken. But Piper's clever and maybe a little crazy, so instead of charm-speaking Chione, she goes over to Festus, who is shut down for repairs. Remember, Festus is a machine. Leo repurposed the bronze dragon of Camp Half-Blood and renamed him Festus after he was done with his repairs. Festus mans the Argo II as its masthead, but he's still not alive. Piper, however, is not only able to wake him up, but he stays awake for the rest of the series. When Leo gets back from his time in Ogygia, even he has absolutely no clue what Piper did, despite arguably being one of the most talented Hephaestus children in years. And we would go even so far to say that Leo is a better machinist than Beckendorf ever was. Even he is completely stumped by just how in the world Piper was able to wake Festus, and in the Blood of Olympus, we find out that the effect is long-term. Leo goes down to meet with the Seven after Coach Hedge left, and he remarks that normally he would want someone on the helm to watch over the Argo II, but ever since Festus was permanently awakened, this is no longer an issue. As far as we can tell, Festus can run 24/7, and Leo can't even give us a good reason why. When she is talking to Festus before waking him up, she calls him a friend and notes that he is more than a machine. He has a personality and a genuine care for his friends, but we still have no idea where these attributes come from. But that's not even her most impressive feat. Later in the Blood of Olympus, she talks to Asclepius into brewing the physician's cure, which he had been forbidden from making for thousands of years. Eons ago, Asclepius was a demigod son of Apollo who became one of the best healers in the land, and eventually he developed the cure to death. Enraged that he would give such power to mortals, Zeus killed him to keep the veil between the mortal and the immortal intact. But when Apollo became furious with Zeus, they agreed to revive Asclepius as the god of medicine. Fun fact, he is actually one of the 6 founding members of Camp Half-Blood, which we have a full video on, but that's not the point right now. The point is that curing death got Asclepius an eternity in prison, and Piper was able to talk him into making it for them without much resistance at all. So not only do we know that she can charm speak gods, she can charm speak some of the most powerful gods we've ever seen. Later in the Blood of Olympus, Festus and the Lost Hero trio take to the skies in order to separate Gaia from her source of power, just like she once did to Uranus all those eons ago. This is a fully awakened Gaia, not the half-slumbering version that has been terrorizing the Seven so far. This is the Gaia who is 100% awake. All she has wanted throughout the series is to rise and reclaim her domain as the Earth, but Piper is able to charm speak her into falling asleep, despite the fact that this is the last thing in the world that Gaia wants. All of the setup regarding how charm speak is most effective when Piper is playing into what someone already wants goes out the window here, yet she's still strong enough to lure Gaia back to sleep. This is not just any goddess, but the primordial goddess of the Earth itself, which is absolutely insane. What's more important about this, however, is that Piper might get to a point where the restriction of having to know her audience might not be relevant forever. If she can defy the will of one of the oldest goddesses in existence and force her to do something she doesn't want to, then who's to say that mortals and demigods need to be bound by those same rules? In fact, we actually learn much more about charm speak from the unlikeliest of sources, which takes us over to the Magnus Chase books where we meet Loki. We all know that Loki is a crafty and conniving trickster god, but he's not strictly reliant on his wits and intelligence to carry out his plans. We know that Loki is a charm speaker, and that much like Aphrodite, he can pass the ability down to his children, which is where figures like Jormungandr and Fenris get the ability. Fenris was able to charm speak Odin himself into letting Sam be a Valkyrie, and this is how he lures his victims into striking range despite the fact that he's bound. Magnus recalls how the warriors in Valhalla are incredibly wary of the silver-tongued children of Loki because their voice is not just convincing, but Magnus describes it as a warm, soothing sensation that makes him feel comfortable. If a child of Loki is able to use this skill to charm speak All-Father Odin himself, and Piper was able to use it against the primordial goddess Gaia, then is there really an upper limit to what can be done with charm speak? Right now, we know that the weaknesses are if a person knows they're being charm spoken, or if they have an unusually strong will or objective that clashes with the wishes of the charm speaker. But we've seen both of these rules be broken before. She allegedly can't make someone do something they don't already want to do, but she puts Gaia to sleep. Fenris allegedly can't do the same thing, but he convinced Odin to trust a daughter of Loki as a Valkyrie. Right now, the only major resistance that anyone shows Piper are when she tries to charm speak Keone and Medea, both of whom are familiar with the practice and can see through Piper's act. This seems to indicate that in this particular domain, practice and familiarity trumps natural skill. Just because Gaia is a goddess doesn't mean she's immune to demigod abilities, so now we have to understand that these seem to be Piper's most pressing opposition. Piper, though, as we mentioned before, is incredibly emotionally connected to everyone around her, and can read people better than anyone on the Argo too. If she can read her enemy and is smart enough to figure out how to twist her enemy's desire to her own advantage, then do we think there's really anything she can't do? If Gaia and Odin are anything to go by, then could Piper possibly figure out how to charm the gods if she does it right? If the person or god in question doesn't have experience with charm speak, then it seems like Piper has free reign to convince just about anyone she wants, and from there, the sky's the limit, as long as it's not a sorcerer or a fellow charm speaker. But that's our take on just how powerful Piper's charm speak ability is, and how she might actually not have an upper limit depending on how well she can read her enemies. But what do you think? Do the strengths that Piper showcases outweigh the weaknesses? And what do you think her main opponents are aside from magic users? As always, we love this series, we love talking about this series, and we'd love to have you join in the conversation down below. Take care, demigods, don't charm speak your teachers, and we'll see you in the next one.